It's showtime for House Republicans this week as they're set to pass their tax reform bill on Thursday. Chairman Kevin Brady expressing confidence that they will have the 218 votes needed to pass the legislation before leaving for Thanksgiving. President Trump also planning to head to the Hill Thursday morning to make a final pitch just before the vote. Now, meanwhile, the Senate continues marking up their own version. But if this bill finally passes, how will it affect women and families across the country? Let me bring in Hadley Heath Manning. She's the Director of Policy at the Independent Women's Forum. Hadley, welcome back.
Of course. Always great to be on your show.
So what do you like better so far, the House or the Senate version, when you're looking through the prism for women and families?
Well, I think both plans have a lot to offer. The House plan goes a little bit further in flattening the tax code, simply reducing the number of brackets, for example. So there's a lot of good things in both plans. And of course, we can admit that neither plan is perfect, and the final package probably won't look exactly like what we're seeing today.
What do you expect to see as far as the corporate tax rate and those SALT deductions? And of those two, what do you think is more critical for the women and families that you talk to and you're thinking about?
Well, that's an important point. You know, corporations don't exist in a parallel universe where women and families won't be affected. Women are big-time workers in our workforce, and that includes working for many large corporations. Women are shareholders. More so now than ever, women are investing in our economy and benefiting when our corporations do well, when our markets do well. And so ultimately, reducing from 35% to 20%, that's a huge change that'll have a huge downstream effect on our economy for people who are, at all income levels. And so I think that's ultimately one of the non-negotiables from the Trump White House. On the other hand,
all genders, there are a bunch of them now, and,
that's right.
And
that's
all
right.
races, because it really reduces one of the biggest barriers to entry for people starting businesses, and that is obviously the cost and what you pay the government.
Right, and women are creating small businesses actually much faster than our male counterparts. Not that it matters, the economy is not a war of the roses, but we do see women, benefiting from more autonomy, and women maybe more so than men value the work-life balance and the flexibility that comes from working for yourself. And there are certain benefits in this tax reform for people who own their own businesses and who file on the individual side of the income tax code. And that includes many women, and the effects for their family, of course, will be shared with their husbands and brothers and shared with the men and their families as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want a rising tide to lift those boats. You don't want the government picking favorites, which is what they do, particularly with the mortgage interest deduction and some of the homeowner credits that we see, because it's as though the government favors homeowners versus renters. But you've got a lot of single moms out there who, through whatever circumstances, haven't been able to purchase their own homes. So they're renting. And again, they're being penalized by the government. What do you say about that?
Yeah, most people in our economy, most tax filers aren't taking that mortgage interest deduction either because they rent or maybe they own a home that they've already paid off, and good for them. But the reasons that we're seeing, so much contention over some of these deductions and credits and loopholes is that the tax code as it exists today is full of unfairness. There are many ways that our tax code tries to manipulate and reward and punish certain groups and behaviors. So getting rid of those things can be a painful process. But ultimately, if we come out with a tax code that collects government revenues in a less destructive way to our economy, that's going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, and you talk about picking winners and losers. You talk about lobbying efforts in order to maintain some of those deductions. If we move to a flat tax, that's better for everyone. If you lower the corporate tax rate and actually move to a flat tax where it cannot be more simple than that. Do you see that ever happening?
Oh, man, we got to think of our tax code today as a huge house that hasn't been cleaned since 1986, and if we get a few of those rooms cleaned up, then that means progress. I don't think we're going to get a perfect bill. I don't think we're going to see a perfectly flat tax that's perfectly fair to everyone. That would be the ideal. But of course, we have to take incremental steps towards the right policy and recognize that lawmakers are facing procedural barriers with this budget reconciliation process. They're trying to make the math work.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy, because unfortunately in Congress right now we got a bunch of hoarders, and all they're doing is spending and storing up favors for their own neighborhoods, and that puts everyone at a disadvantage. Thank you for your hard work in this area. Appreciate it, Hadley. Good to see you.
Thanks, Kennedy.